Hi there. I first want to thank the first gen bachelorette chord ceremony reps for inviting me to make this speech digitally. I wish I was there at the ceremony in person, but considering the times and what we're going through, very understandable. And so, before I introduce myself, I wanted to get that out of the way. And I want to specifically thank Victoria Smith for keeping me in mind and over the past year for making these type of public speeches. You know, my name is Thomas Hughes. I'm an Alaska native. I'm from Juneau, Alaska, and was raised in the southeast area. I am a first generation college student. In a lot of respects, I was a first generation high school graduate student from my family, and didn't have a very strong background in school, growing up, and and there was a lot of members in my family that didn't either. So definitely know the challenges of what it, from being a first gen student, and I will get into that. Just a little background on my education. I graduated from Juneau Douglas High School in 1997. Eventually went to UAS in my mid-20s. Had a little more break, after about 4 years of school there. And I had about a 2-3 year break and worked, and then eventually made it to UAF. And I eventually finished up here in my early 30s with and got a civil engineering degree. And I now work for the Alaska Department of Transportation as a design engineer, and out of the Fairbanks office. And so that was just a little background of me. And so what drew me to school? I took a real unconventional route, going to school. At first, my educational background was really, as I got out of high school, was really limited, and so I went back to school to get a couple math classes in so I can be eligible to get into an electrical union. And my mindset was on being in the labor field as I was up to that point, whether it was carpentry, logging, tree thinning, just anything that involved brute force labor. That's what I loved to do. And eventually became a carpenter during that time also. And so, but up to that point, I did not have a strong educational background, and my confidence level in school was really, really limited. And but lo and behold, as I took a few classes, I started passing them with decent grades, and it was a real big surprise to me, I'm not gonna lie. And so my motivations during that time changed from being in the IBEW to sticking it out in college for a few years. There was waiting list for the IBEW, so it's kind of just, I'll stay in school. And so at first I went to school for business at a UAS down the University of Southeast Alaska down in Juneau. And then eventually my motivations changed as my confidence started increasing. And so I kept working my way up in math. And I told myself when I got up to calculus, if I passed that class, I was going to move on to civil engineering, which really interests me because I was really interested in that field. And so, and eventually, I made my way to UAF, and then I eventually graduated, and a reminder, first gen student, so it was a real special moment for me as well as it is for the people on the other side of this video. What challenges came along the way? Well, challenges were all over the place, and some things I faced was a lot of failure, all the way through high school, extending into school, extending me to break up school, returned to school in an unconventional way as a returning student, and with my confidence completely rocked in most cases, completely brought me down to my knees on, trying to find where I belonged, specifically in the school area. And with me being a first generation student, I'll just say that the confidence level was just really, really low in a college setting, in a professional setting. And and it really showed. I had to overcome a lot of personal challenges, whether it be from just not being able to, um, hold a thought, do homework, personal issues, substance abuse issues, and it just came in waves all the way through, all the way when I was in grade school, all the way through until I really started to get on step, and so it was just a challenge all the way. And so that the way it impacted me is just, as I kept knocking down barriers, my confidence level just kept increasing over time, and it just kept building on each other, and the momentum just started building. I started getting a sense that I do belong in this setting, and that the fact that I was a first generation college student wasn't, holding me back, or that thought of me being that, and the thought of me being in that position that kind of had a negative, thinking it had a negative impact on, my outlook and such along those lines. And so it definitely helped me grow, and it definitely helped build, the person I am today on an educational professional, as a father, as a husband, all the way around. And so definitely coming from that level and getting to where I am at now, definitely a lot of challenges, but it was well worth it. And so you're looking at my internal narrative over that time, as I went through school, high school into, college, anytime I was in school, my internal narrative was just this: how am I going to survive? How am I going to navigate? I don't belong in this setting. That was kind of where I was at for years. And as I started getting classes under my belt, my narrative for, my outlook on life really started changing. And the power of the universities in the state and the people I've met, and and the confidence I built from passing classes really helped me kind of strive forward. And it was really really great feeling. And all of a sudden my narrative changed to, like, I do belong in this setting, and I'm ready for this now, and I'm ready to move forward and to knock down barriers. And so, you know, as I was navigating through this, the role my family had on this was, so great, and it was, as the momentum built and I started getting classes under my belt, it really had a profound effect on all my family around me. My wife, my two boys looking up to me, my mom and my dad, and the support I got from them, and the look I got to see in their eyes, knowing that my son, my husband, my father is going to be a college graduate, and it's having a profound effect even to this day. Seeing my son now graduating high school and says he wants to be a civil engineer, and he's taking the proper steps to do that is just unbelievable. And so family is so important, so some unique strengths, that I felt that I had to being a first gen student, could almost be looked at as, I think it's kind of mixed on how it kind of be looked at, but is, I just don't take things for granted. In my situation, I came from a poor background that didn't have in my family, we didn't have strong tradition of education. And, people I looked up to were either in and out of jail, and I was kind of falling in along those lines. And I've watched, life just kind of snatch things, even to this day, just swipe my whole family, and put them to their, knees. And it's brought me to that, and so I know things can change at any time. So it always kept me on edge, and as I moved forward and, started becoming a successful student, definitely, I was able to use those kind of, use that, as motivation that, things can change at any time, I can move forward from that, and they have, and so just a lot of challenges, and we all go through it, and so it's just something that I used, that has really helped me push forward and to become a better person, and staying humble. And so that's another thing too. It was really hard to stay humble, but I've learned to sit there and as a first gen student, I'm kind of rolling around with a chip on my shoulder, and it was hard to stay humble. So what I know now that I wish I known post college graduation. That one was my expectations for what I was going to experience out in the workforce didn't match what I was thinking when I graduated school. And so definitely it was like starting over, when I was starting with school. Now I'm in the professional workforce. I'm around people that I perceive as really smart and know that are really smart now. And it was really hard to sit there and kind of match, what I learned in school, and what I thought I was getting into, and match that with kind of reality. And so definitely it was a big change in the way I, do business and the way I think things should be done. And but with saying that, all the skills that I learned in the college setting and school setting from educational professional, really started clicking after a while. And because you start gaining that confidence again, like when you were in school, you start building it up, and you're like, okay, I belong. So it's coming full circle. It's just like you start over, and but it was quite the feeling, and kind of like when I was in school, it was just you got to that point where I've been in my industry about 8 years now, and you just there was a point where it was just clicked, and it just started feeling very confident in my abilities and my ability to, express myself, and so it's quite the feeling. So that was one thing that it just didn't match up right when I came in the workforce. I kind of what I thought was coming my way, and I imagine that's going to be the case for a lot of people, a lot of the graduates that I'm talking to right now. And so I want to, you guys done it. And so, my mission always in life is to portray, not in life, but what I would like to do is always portray the message in my story of kind of what I went through. And I just want to thank, the first gen bachelor accord ceremony for allowing me to speak. And I want to let everybody know on the other end of this camera that we did it. People are doing it, and it's on us to sit there and to speak to these people that are in the situation being first gen students, because it's not easy. It just isn't when that background isn't there, built through generations, and it's just something a challenge that is always going to be with us. It's always going to be on our minds. And whether you're helping out a brother, sister, whoever, kids, wife, try to find a place to portray that message of it can be done, and it will be done, and the way. And another piece of advice is for me is staying humble. That's what I've learned to do. I went through school and life with a chip on my shoulder, and it really portrayed in my everyday attitude. And once I learned to kind of let go, let my guard down a little bit, and stay humble and allow myself to be molded by others and to listen to others, things opened up so much for me. And so I want to thank you. I've taken up probably more time than I should. And as we would say in the Klingon language, is kunis cheese, and that is thank you.